Got some OTA updates for you, including some injury report stuff. And then for the rest of the show, I'm going to tell you about a rich tradition of the Minnesota Vikings that if you haven't heard of before, it's going to become your favorite thing. I'm going to tell you a story here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, your Pat, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at LukeBraunNFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today on the show, most of it is going to be about some history stuff, but of course, we got to talk about some the details about OTAs. Yesterday, we talked about how Ihmir Smith-Marsette was in a walking boot or brace or something, and Kevin O'Connell was asked about that at OTAs on Wednesday, and he said basically that they expect him to be back at the start of camp and that his spring is done, but they expect him to make a full recovery and be back at camp. Those were his words. So maybe Smith-Marsette can be back and still be more of a contributor. I don't know. I am taking that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But he also mentioned that KJ Osborne had some little minor something that he also doesn't expect to be a long-term deal. But look, man, actions speak louder than words on this kind of stuff. And they went out and signed Albert Wilson. And Kevin O'Connell didn't deny that that was like part of the decision-making calculus. You lose a couple receivers, you bring a body in. That is totally how things work. By the way, to make room on the 90-man roster for that transaction, the Vikings cut A.J. Burroughs, the running back, if you might remember last year, a bit of a preseason darling last year. He had one really good game, and I think everybody got really, really excited about him. But he sort of fell off in the other two games, and so that doesn't shock me a lot. He's kind of one of those guys that you keep around for as long as it's convenient to. So AJ Rose out, Albert Wilson in, and the other thing is Za'Darius Smith wasn't out there. So I talked a lot all offseason about the nature of Za'Darius Smith's injury and how it's kind of the same as Danielle Hunter's injury in that it can re-aggravate at any time. With Za'Darius Smith's, it's a much more minor version of that injury, so the risk, I believe, is going to be lessened, but it's still there. So when he's held out, my heart skips a beat a little bit. You know, oh no, what's that? And O'Connell was asked about this. He said that it was a precautionary measure and that they are not concerned at all long-term and that he should be fine. I don't know if I should say it, but I think I'm going to say it. This sounds a lot like the tweak thing. I don't know, man. I'm not a doctor, all right? And I'm totally speculating, talking big time out of my rear end here. But it sounds like the tweak thing. It sounds like that's how those injuries present, is that they start with a minor pain and, oh, you're a little sore, let's keep you out and make sure we don't. And then you wake up the next week and, you can't move. And that's how Danielle Hunter's happened. That's why we got the infamous tweak line from Mike Zimmer, because Danielle Hunter said, yeah, I think it's just minor pain. And so Mike Zimmer said minor pain, and then it turned into something more, and he ended up missing the whole season. And that is that injury. And so with somebody who has the injury history of Za'Darius Smith, to have, minor precautionary measures stuff. Oh no, I don't know. That it just scares me. But I'm also like absolutely shell-shocked by the Danielle Hunter saga and probably like overweighting the probability that it is that. It could just be an ankle thing, right? He didn't specify what part of the body. So it could be, a sore wrist, right? Like it could be anything. So I don't want to like strike the fear of God, and I definitely don't want anybody to mistake me for like reporting anything. I'm just reading the tea leaves a little bit, and I don't like the similarities that we are seeing between that and another time when similar language was used. Could totally be nothing though, and I would sure prefer that. But otherwise, I mean, we're getting this sense from OTAs that I get a very first day of school vibe from all the players talking and the coaches talking. There's a lot of, we're throwing a lot at you right at the beginning and we get it and we're all learning together and there's this positive energy. And there's always some of that when you have a new staff in, right? Obviously, the new staff is replacing something that was bad enough to get fired. So the idea of, a little bit of novelty is going to be a nice thing. But there seems to be we're starting to see like the collaboration message that they've been throwing out at every single thing for the entire offseason. I think we're starting to see that in actual action. And how everybody's talking. There's a lot of open dialogue, and you can talk to this person or that person. Adam Thielen saying like, "Oh my goodness," or I think it was Kendricks saying, the Wilfs were actually in one of my meetings, and we could actually talk to them. Nobody else's owner does that for them, and he was really appreciative of it. There's dialogue between coaches and players, and coaches on one side of the ball and the other side of the ball. It just seems like there's a lot. I mean, everybody's learning a lot. They're all learning new verbiage, and the verbiage is a big thing in these OTAs, and so they're all kind of getting this new system down and the new versions of this or that. And Kirk Cousins actually had a great answer to talking about that and how he kind of relates. Well, this is that play that I knew before, and they just call it something different, and being able to kind of translate and go from translating to just thinking in the new language and all that good stuff. To be a fly on the wall, right? I would love to actually see those moments and hear those moments and be as close to them as I can. But it is pretty cool that we are kind of seeing them all learn, and everybody understands that there's a lot of learning, and that we're all we're in this together, just trying to get all this stuff down. It's really, really dope. So I don't know. There's your dose of optimism. But for the rest of this, I want to talk about a little bit of grab ass. I'm just going to leave it at that. Before we get into grab ass, I want to talk to you about Blue Nile. Blue Nile is an online jeweler that can get you set up, whether it's an engagement ring or something for a big milestone or just a nice gift for that special someone. Blue Nile has you covered. They have a great online customization engine that can let you put together exactly what is right for you. Because look, everybody's different, and your special someone is unique and deserves something just as unique as they are. Blue Nile is committed to ensuring that the highest ethical standards are observed when sourcing all of their diamonds and jewelry, and they have a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and it comes in a nice discreet box that won't give away what's inside. I know a few people that has happened to. That's a thing to think about. So make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Vikings listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. Use code LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON, all one word. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in that discreet packaging. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Hey, go check out our listener survey. You can give feedback on all Locked On podcasts that we will use to make our product better for you. All we want to do is give y'all something that you like. So tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. It doesn't take very long, and everybody that completes a survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. Take our audience survey at lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. That's lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. When I say the word lateral, what comes to mind when you're thinking about the Vikings? What's cool is there are a few. There's infamously the Randy Moss lateral to Mo Williams in, I want to say 2002. There was the Miracle at the Met had a hook and ladder to set it up. Perhaps you go all the way back to 1969, Thanksgiving. Jim Marshall intercepts a pass tipped by Alan Page, runs up, laterals it back to Alan Page to finish off the score. They went up 27-0, one of the coolest games of that whole year. The Vikings have a bit of a propensity for this. It's weird how many cool lateral moments that they have. It's a bit of a rich tradition, and it goes back to grab ass. Grab ass is the name the players had for a little game that they would play between downs. Mostly the offensive and defensive linemen would be between drills, and all the other smaller guys would be off doing something, and so they would just kind of dope around with the ball. This is way back in the 70s. I got this out of Carl Kosulki's book that detailed his time with the Vikings, so kind of that era. And he would tell the story of grab ass, and that it was the way for them to just kind of pass time. It was a game. It wasn't like catch. They weren't just throwing the ball around. It was a game that seemed to have some structure to it, but unfortunately, nobody I can find actually remembers. So If there happen to be any old Vikings legends listening that played grab ass and would like to describe more in detail about what grab ass was, please reach out. Send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. But my rudimentary understanding is that it was kind of like rugby, and it was kind of like keep away, and it was kind of like a hot potato thing, and it was like just mostly an excuse to just kind of horse around in your downtime during practice. Like a hot 2 a day, and you're just kind of like killing time. Unbeknownst to all of these people, they were developing like real ball skills. Remember, these are not typical ball carriers playing this. I mean, you'd have the receivers and the running backs were off doing some other drill while these guys were playing. These are the big boys. These are the O-line, the D-line. And they would just kind of be fooling around, practicing, throwing and catching the ball to each other. And because it was kind of rugby-like, where you would have to have, I want to say it, that implies that it was lateraling, that you didn't have a lot of forward passing necessarily. But either way, I mean, you're just kind of you get tackled, you try to get the ball to the next guy, and you practice and you rehearse that. And so go back knowing this, go back and just watch that highlight of Jim Marshall lateraling the ball back to Alan Page in 1969. This muddy, snowy Thanksgiving game. It was like perfect, like NFC Central that back then, like perfect 1960s black and blue division football. And go back and watch it. And what you'll find is that looks really smooth. Like, it's really smooth. It is not, you see some of the lateraling that happens on other teams. I mean, if you want to see a lateral, go find a team that's down by a touchdown with like 80 yards to go and only enough time left on the clock for one play, right? Like too far for a Hail Mary, they have to do the weird lateral thing. It's chaotic. It's ugly. It's not rehearsed at all. It's very improvisational, and people forget the rules all the time. Like, can you kick the ball and all that stuff? Like, it's the dumbest thing imaginable. And because it's not like a thing you necessarily practice, right? That game is well out of hand. You're not going to spend practice time trying to figure out how to do the most impossible play in football. But with that one specifically, that 1969 lateral, it looked so rehearsed. And imagine my surprise when I was like, man, that was really smooth. And I'm thinking like, yeah, of course it was smooth. Jim Marshall is an insane athlete, and so is Alan Page. These guys are just good at stuff. They can play one game of basketball, and they're probably better than everybody and everybody else's uncle. Like, that's just how these guys, some of these all-pro like Hall of Famers work. But imagine my surprise when I'm flipping through Carl Kosulki's book and I learn about grab ass, and I go, that's why it looked so practiced. Because they practiced. And there's something so fun about that. That 1969 season, I'm probably just going to wax poetic for the rest of the show about that 1969 team, because for all the teams of the Vikings those old Vikings were rowdy. Like, they weren't the, mean heels of the league like the Raiders were back then, and, just win baby and all that stuff, like breaking the rules or anything like that. But you boys partied. And they were just so fun, and there was so many shenanigans, and there was so much togetherness that it reflects very interestingly on kind of what we're going through as a franchise today, where we're going through this moment where there was, culture, fear-based culture, and what about collaboration, and where it's such an emphasis on working together and all this camaraderie and teammate stuff. Ask anybody who can answer a question about the 1969 team and ask, why was this the successful team? And they'll go, because we played together. It's super dope. I think I want to just expand and just talk a little bit about that 69 team in particular. But first, let me talk to you about your car. It's summer, it's rainy season in Minnesota, or maybe just like hot season anywhere else. But it's important to have yourself set up with everything you need. You do not want to blow a tire in the wrong spot and not have a tire kit on you. You can get that tire kit or whatever you need for your car at rockauto.com. RockAuto.com is a car parts aggregator. They've been doing this kind of thing online for 15 years. They're a family-run company, and they're looking to take care of you because, let's be honest, navigating the market for anything involving your car is rife with people looking to pull one over on you, and Rock Auto is not going to do that. You can get anything you would get from a mechanic or an auto body shop, but you can get it directly from manufacturers. You're cutting out that middleman. You're cutting out that, hey, do you have this part? And they go check in the back, and they come back. They're like, we have to order it special, and we're going to charge you for that. None of that stuff. Just go to rockauto.com and get the part you need. You can enter your make, your year, and your model, and it will sort through their insane catalog of possible car parts to make sure you're getting something compatible with your car. So head on over to rockauto.com, and whatever it is you buy, whether it's like full-on gear head, carburetors, or you're just buying a pair of jumper cables, let them know in the How You Heard About Us section that Locked On sent you, because if you don't, the rabbits will start taking hostages, after which point I cannot control them. Rock Auto, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Grab-ass was far from the only game the Vikings played back in 1969 in training camp. I talked to you a little bit about, go listen to the Carl Kasulki episode where I talked about a couple of the other stories that I got from his book, bottle rockets going off and weird games of hide and seek with the coach. Like it was a very fun time. You get this sense that everybody was really having fun and they were all together. And part of that will always happen when you have a group of relatively young men all having singular figures of authority that they can rebel against. There's going to be fun times. I mean, look, we've all been there. Even if maybe you went to a summer camp as a kid, or maybe it was just a sleepover and you didn't want to wake the parents up, or college experiences if you went to college like that. We've all had these experiences where you've been in a group of people that are all your friends and you're all trying to get away with something. And that sort of camaraderie is really where true bonds are forged. And it's part of why I think if you remember when the Vikings opened TCO Performance Center and training camp wasn't going to be in Mankato anymore, you remember there was a lot of backlash to that. And this is why, because you brought everybody an hour away from home. They're all staying in these hot, crappy, if any, air conditioning dorms. They're rooming together. They're getting to know each other. They're goofing off after curfew, but trying not to get caught goofing off after curfew. You know, they're all going to the same bars, except they wouldn't go to the one that they knew the coaches would be at. They're all getting in trouble. And that sort of thing where, you can sit around a campfire and tell a million stories about all your old times. That's where those bonds are forged. And that, I gotta think that translates on the field, right? Like, you're never going to be able to prove it. You're never going to be able to measure it. You're never going to be able to put that into, NFL scraper and say, what about the teams that had camaraderie versus the teams that didn't? And, where did they show up on the EPA chart? You're not going to be able to do that. But I think it would be foolish to deny the impact that has on a team. And I mean, you can kind of find proxy ways to do it. Kevin O'Connell just talked about one in OTAs on Wednesday in his post-OTA presser. He uses the phrase player ownership a lot about like, well, I'm teaching them a system, but ultimately it's on them to go out there on the field. And once the play is started and the bullets are flying, you're not in a system anymore. You're in a play and you're in a world where you have to find it. And he's kind of talking about that. And he's talking about, Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen. They played together for 4 years. You kind of start to expect a little bit of that chemistry. And in OTAs, Adam Thielen had kind of the catch of the day, one of those crazy cool highlight catches. And apparently that was one of those times where it's an on-the-fly adjustment that's in the play. That's something that they have available to them. But it's one of those adjustments that they both have to see the same. That's how a lot of those plays work. You have, well, if he goes left, I go right. And the quarterback also has to see it and say, okay, well, if he goes left, I'm throwing it right. And if the quarterback throws it right, but the wide receiver didn't see that adjustment or make that adjustment, that's where you get a lot of those passes that you go, oh my God, there was nobody in the vicinity. What happened there? That's the miscommunication is usually one player made an adjustment and the other player didn't. And that is the sort of thing that once you've played together for 4 years and you know how the other guy looks at things and thinks about things, you can do a better job as the quarterback of predicting what he's going to do. And more specifically, you can do a better job of, seeing it the way he's going to see it and knowing, okay, is he going to make that adjustment? Because even if I'm the quarterback and I think that adjustment needs to be made, but I've been playing with Adam Thielen for 4 years and I know he's not going to make the adjustment in that particular situation because I know him very well, then I know not to throw it, even though that's the way I think it should be thrown. And like that's the value of chemistry, right? In a perfect world, everybody sees every secondary movement the exact same way. And, you don't have to have trust in each other. You could get any two random strangers and they all see it the same way and they'll all react the same way. But one, defenses are designed not to let you do that. And, to stress that, to make it so that, did he go left? Does that count as he went left and now I have to go right? Or does it not count and I should stay on my normal path? Like, that's the whole point of a lot of those defenses, is to straddle those lines. And like half technique, the way that safeties play it, they're supposed to straddle those things and, kind of make it hard, make it so it's a fuzzy gray area. You want to find the gray areas on defense. And so if there are gray areas, you'll find them. And so it makes it really important to know that, like, okay, in the gray area, you're going to react this way. Are you the kind of receiver that's going to err on the side of making the adjustment if you see the tiniest little thing about it? Or are you the kind of receiver that needs to see a really dramatic trigger to actually go and make the adjustment? And knowing that as a quarterback, one might not be more correct than the other, but as the quarterback, you got to know which side of that fence they fall on. All of that is a really long-winded way to kind of bring it all back and say that camaraderie is important. But maybe on a deeper level, these are a group of humans, and groups of humans are going to react to adversity differently from each other. Individuals will react differently from each other, but even groups will take on their own little personalities. And I think that's really where you see teams separate themselves. Middle of the season, all but 2 teams have taken a loss. How they responded to that loss is what separates, the teams that can go, that Packers team a few years ago, that was 4-6, and they had their whole run the table thing. They made it to the NFC Championship. Teams that can do that versus teams like the Jaguars or Texans that start out 0-3 and pretty much give up on the year. I remember John Fox's Bears being a lot like that. I remember being able to kind of circle the Week 17 game against John Fox's Bears as a win every single year, because they had so much quit in them. And if it was a meaningless game, they wouldn't get up for it because they couldn't bounce back from that adversity. It's something I think the Vikings have lacked recently. And I'm not going to say it's because they don't go to Mankato anymore. Like, there could be a gajillion reasons for it. And yeah, losing Mankato and that camaraderie and that sort of summer camp vibe could be one of them, could not be one of them. But it's definitely something that I think the players miss. And I think there was a heart and a soul, and it was no more apparent than in that 69 team, that wonderful storybook season where they run all the way to the Super Bowl and then they fall apart and lose to the Chiefs, which is a great story. Honestly, that whole game is a phenomenal story, but maybe a story for another day. But what I will leave you with is, after that 69 season, after they lost to the Chiefs, 1970's schedule comes out. And who else would be Week 1 but the Kansas City Chiefs? Of course, they're going to make the Vikings host the Chiefs right after they got their whole bubble burst by the Chiefs, and now you got to take them into your house. And what happens? The Vikings figured them out. I think they spent that whole offseason looking and watching, and they had a propensity for this. They had a similar exchange with the Colts the year prior, where 1968 they went to the playoffs, the Colts beat them up, and then they played the Colts week 2, and they had a totally new game plan, and they hung 50 on the Colts. And a very similar thing happened with the Chiefs. This was a team that didn't tend to make the same mistakes twice. That game's dagger was a defensive touchdown scored by Roy Winston off of a fumble recovery and a lateral. A little bit of grab ass, helping them get as much revenge as you can get in a regular season matchup, Week 1, the year after losing to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Always been about grab ass. And honestly, I have no idea when grab ass ended and when they stopped playing it, but every time I see a really cool lateral, I gotta think, did that happen because they were horsing around the right way at training camp? It's just the greatest little happy accident. Tomorrow, I have no idea what we're going to talk about. We'll figure something out. So, I don't know. Stay tuned. Might be some cool history stuff like that. Maybe we'll do the 69 Super Bowl. That seems like a pretty fun one. But either way, I will see you all tomorrow with something. And as always, Skull.